Picture this: 4,080 Marines boxed into hostile ground, their magazines nearly empty, enemy fire spitting from every ridge. Command had already begun drafting a list of the fallen. The manual insisted they hold. The manual ordered them to wait. But when standing still meant certain death, a single overlooked sniper tore that page from the script. This is the story of Sergeant Dana Morales, the Marine they wrote off as useless, who drew her own line and brought back an entire battalion alive. Before we dive deeper, drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? I love seeing our military family spread across the world, the heat and grit baked white into every crease of uniform and gear. In the chow hall, laughter bounced hard against the walls, careless and sharp, the sound of Marines piling their plates before the next patrol. But far from the clang of trays and the easy banter, one figure sat alone, cross-legged on a tarp with a rifle resting across her lap. Sergeant Dana Morales, 27 years old, Marine Corps sniper, moved with the discipline of a metronome. Every motion was measured, steady, and deliberate. Her build was smaller than most around her, barely topping 5 feet, shoulders narrow under the tan blouse. Where the others carried themselves with swagger, she radiated restraint. She pulled a claw through the bore, checked the bolt face, then scribbled notes into a small spiral notebook balanced on her knee. To her, the M40A5 wasn't just a firearm, it was an extension of her own thoughts. She logged every change like it was scripture: scope clicks, humidity shifts, wear along the muzzle. She knew exactly how her rifle would breathe on any given day. 2 lance corporals strolled past on their way to the barracks, their smirks meant to jab. "There's the quota, sniper," one muttered, loud enough for her to catch. "Paper shooter," the other added with a chuckle. Good thing cardboard doesn't shoot back. Neither paused, neither expected her to answer, and Dana didn't. She simply polished the bolt and jotted another line in her book. She'd heard it all before: dead weight, mascot, box check, sniper too small, too quiet, too different. Even seasoned sergeants, men with 3 deployments behind them, brushed her aside with smug certainty. "Morales is good for range scores," one had told the company commander. "But combat, put her on radios, let her stay useful, that's it." And that's what they did. She was relegated to support duty, lugging gear, checking comms, filling out logistics sheets. Nobody asked her to climb a ridge. Nobody asked her to put eyes through the scope when it counted. She was told, politely, to stay in her lane. What they didn't realize, because they never bothered to see, was that Dana Morales built her own training regimen in the silence of long nights. While the others swapped stories in the smoke pit, she spread maps under the red glow of a flashlight, memorizing terrain until it lived in her head. She tracked the winds, logging every shift across different valleys at different hours. She drilled trigger discipline with dry fires until her breath was steady as a pendulum. And in that little green notebook, the one that looked like a grocery list, she recorded everything: ballistic tables, environmental offsets, hand-worked calculations in case electronics failed. Each page filled with careful handwriting, rows of figures, arrows plotted across grids. Her private doctrine, invisible to those convinced she had none. On her forearm, hidden under her sleeve, lay a small tattoo: the Marine sniper emblem, a scoped rifle encircled by laurel. She had earned it with sweat and precision, through a school that punished hesitation and demanded perfection. But here in Helmand, she tugged the sleeve lower. No need to remind men already certain she didn't belong. That was the paradox of Dana Morales. She never snapped when mocked. She never pushed back when brushed aside. She didn't waste words trying to prove a point. She carried the insults the same way she carried her rifle: quietly, carefully, and with endless patience. She wasn't waiting for permission. She was waiting for the day when all her charts, numbers, and discipline would finally be impossible to ignore. Her story didn't begin in Helmand. It started in Clayton, New Mexico, where evenings smelled of dust and mesquite, and the horizon stretched endlessly across flat farmland. Her father, a Marine who had deployed twice before injuries forced him home, raised her with discipline carved into daily life, even though the closest base was hours away. Chores before sunrise, fences mended before breakfast, and when the sky turned purple at dusk, he lined soda cans on the fence posts and handed her a battered hunting rifle. "Steady breath," he would say. "Slow trigger. Let the shot surprise you." At 12, Dana could clear every can at 50 yards without missing. By 16, she outshot most of the grown men who came to hunt. Her father never spoke much, but the quiet pride in his eyes told her everything she needed. When he died suddenly in her senior year, Dana Morales enlisted in the Marines, partly to honor him, but also to prove she carried his discipline deep in her bones. She carried it well enough to earn a sniper's billet, a rare achievement for a woman, and one even fewer were ever acknowledged for. But in Helmand, paper credentials meant little against opinions already set in stone. So she took her rifle to the range and her notebooks back to the bunk, enduring whispers while others strutted with swagger. The compound itself spun in routine. Patrols out, reports in. Marines standing in chow lines. Briefings repeating the same clipped mantras. Dana moved along the edges, present but never valued. Then the orders landed. 480 Marines with attachments were tasked to sweep a valley described as lightly defended. Intel painted it as routine. Secure, clear, stabilize. The maps showed ridgelines and open ground, straightforward lanes. Command sold it as simple. Sitting in the back with her notebook on her thigh, Dana studied the contours differently. The lines screamed danger. Narrow entries, high ground on 3 sides, perfect kill zones waiting to snap shut. She raised her hand once, steady as stone. "Sir, have we considered the valley being a deliberate trap? These folds here," she pointed at the map, "they could hide a strong enemy force. It feels too neat." Colonel Grant Mercer, running the briefing, barely glanced at her. "Sergeant, track equipment, not strategy. That's above your pay grade." Laughter rippled through the room. "Dead weight talking tactics," one Marine muttered. Dana closed her notebook and said nothing. When the briefing ended, Marines slung rifles, tightened helmets, and joked about how quick the sweep would be. From the sidelines, Dana watched them climb into transports and roll toward the valley's mouth. 480 Marines, moving by doctrine, carrying confidence untouched by doubt. She was left behind again, assigned to support duty. Her orders were simple: monitor comms, track supply runs, and stay far from the fight. It was all she'd been told, all she'd been trained to accept. But as the dust from the departing convoys rolled across the compound and their outlines shrank into the horizon, Dana felt the weight of every figure she'd charted in her notebooks, every line she'd sketched under red light at midnight. She had studied that valley long before the orders ever came down. She had already imagined how it would close. And now, with 480 Marines driving straight into its jaws, she was benched, sidelined. The next morning, the briefing room buzzed with the bravado of men who believed the map would bend to their will. Dana sat in her usual spot near the back, notebook balanced steady on her thigh, pencil tucked behind her ear. Colonel Grant Mercer dragged a red dot across the projected terrain. Ridges, roots, hold sites, clean on the slide, brutal in reality. When he paused for questions, Dana lifted her hand with the same calm precision she used behind a scope. "Sir, this valley's a trap," she said evenly. "These folds create intersecting fields of fire. If they set machine guns on the spurs and RPG teams in the draw, our convoys will be pinned in a bowl." Mercer didn't even follow her pointer, just glanced at her name tape. "You're here to carry radios, not give strategy." Laughter rippled again. A private pantomimed scribbling notes and winked at his buddy. Dana's fingers clenched around the cardboard back of her notebook, then slowly eased. The colonel clicked forward, the red beam sweeping past and erasing her from the frame. On the range the next day, the wind quartered left to right, enough to make easy shots honest. Dana lay prone, narrowed her world into reticle and heat shimmer, and dialed her dope. Inhale, exhale. Steel rang, steady and indifferent. "Luck," a young private muttered when the 500 plate jumped. A gunnery sergeant spat into the dust. "Clay pigeons don't shoot back," he drawled, "and paper doesn't scream." Dana logged each shot by habit, distance, wind, hold, impact, and stripped the rifle to 0 without defending herself. In the mess hall, trays squealed along the rails. She sat down, and 4 Marines across from her scraped their chairs back in unison, moving to another table. "Babysitter with a rifle," one muttered, not bothering to lower his voice. Dana kept eating, jaw steady, spoon quiet against the bowl. Later, the only sound she allowed herself was the scratch of pencil on paper, shading the contour lines where the valley pinched like a fist. On a base patrol near the motor pool, 2 SEALs strolled past with the easy symmetry of men who could read each other by a glance. A few Marines from Dana's company leaned against a Humvee, watching as she adjusted an antenna. "Dead weight," one declared flatly, like news. "Never seen a sniper too scared to deploy." One SEAL's mouth twitched into a smirk. The other let out a short chuckle. Dana finished the radio check, logged the serial, and moved on. The insults had grown from whispers to labels, to names meant to cement her at the bottom of the order. Meanwhile, 480 Marines pushed deeper toward the valley. For a while, the radios ticked with routine chatter, position checks, fuel updates, empty reports. Drone feed showed convoy dots crawling along a dirt finger, heat shimmer bending the image. Then the rhythm faltered. One report never came. 2 voices overlapped, jagged and strained. Someone called for dismounts. Someone else cursed an engine that wasn't the issue. And then came the sound you only hear once, the crack in a man's voice when the world in front of him detonates. "Contact, contact." Static swallowed the rest. Another net cut in. "Taking fire, East Ridge." A third voice tried to break in and dissolved into ragged breathing. The drone feed flared with heat signatures, muzzle flashes stitching angry commas across the ridgelines. Smoke pulsed from the draw as convoy dots compressed and froze, and conversations inside the command post dropped to murmurs. The watch officer lowered his headset and stared blankly, as if sheer focus could will the screen to change. A lieutenant snatched up a checklist, flipped through it, and found no line that fit what he was seeing. Chairs stopped moving. The room shifted into a soundscape of shallow breaths, clicking cursors and generator hum, broken only by one phrase repeated like armor. "Hold position. Wait. Follow protocol." "Too hot," a major said, grateful to cling to the phrase. "No air support inside 200 meters." A captain echoed it louder, as if volume could turn it into strategy. "Rules are clear. We hold outside the bubble." Oh, on a side monitor, a helmet cam revealed dust crawling over grass, the horizon jerking with panicked breath. Rounds chewed dirt inches from boots, bearings shouted without conviction. Dana eased closer to the back rail, her eyes locked on a drone angle that barely caught the crown of a gun pit along the eastern spur. She counted bursts, traced the traverse in her head, read the smoke bends for wind. Colonel Grant Mercer asked for options. The Major repeated the manual. We need them to bound out of the ring, then we can bring steel. His tone framed inaction as strategy. They can't bound, a captain admitted under his breath. Then they hold, the Major replied, clinging to doctrine. The earlier laughter had no place here. Men who once smirked busied their hands. Jokes choked into silence. Dana laid her palm against the canvas of her rifle case. The familiar drag of leather steadied her, not defiance but clarity. On the feed, the machine gun on the eastern spur swept bursts into a gully where Marines clawed low to survive. An RPG team shifted for a clean shot, knees digging into dirt. Too hot, the Major repeated, holding the line. Nobody's asking for ordnance, Dana Morales finally said. A rifle will do. Colonel Mercer turned slightly, not enough to call it attention. We are not authorizing anything that violates the 200-meter rule. It's not about authorization, she replied calmly. It's geometry. Give me position and time, and I'll cut their anchors without hitting ours. A captain let out a laugh that cracked halfway. You'll fix a battalion fight with a scope and an opinion, Sergeant. From the doorway, Lance Corporal Mason Price tossed in his favorite jab. Deadweight wants a field trip. The radios carried new sounds now, the flattened syllables of men standing at the edge. A squad leader tried to climb from panic to command and fell short. Command, this is Bravo, he gasped. We are pinned. Casualties mounting. We cannot push. We cannot pull back. We need... The voice cracked before fading. Colonel Grant Mercer called for artillery clearance. The answer came late. Wrong angles. Smoke was suggested, then shot down. The wind would weaponize it against their own men. The drone shifted view, catching just enough of the gun pit on the spur to make Dana's palms itch. Dust coughed from its muzzle, the traverse ticking like a metronome. She knew the space between bursts. She knew the gap her bullet required. She slid the zipper open on her rifle case. The sound was faint, but a first sergeant near the door glanced up, ready to shut it down. The M40, A5, came free, steel and glass solid in her hands. By touch, she checked the bolt, locked a magazine, and swung the sling onto her shoulder. I can end this, she whispered, not just to the weapon, but against the muscle memory of obedience that had muzzled her for months. Sergeant, the first sergeant barked, falling back on rank. Where are you going with that? Out, she answered. Before another word landed, a call sign she knew broke off mid-sentence on the net. Another voice stumbled in, choking on air. 200-meter rule stands, Mercer repeated, as if repeating it might conjure safety. No one moved. Men who had laughed now studied their hands. The ones who had whispered stayed silent. Officers shuffled papers, rearranging procedures. The monitors kept reporting a reality indifferent to their comfort. Dana slung the rifle, eyes flicking from screen to door and back again. The angles outside were brutal, but solvable. The distances punishing, but not beyond reach. She pictured the shallow saddle on the near ridge, firing lanes cutting through anchors. 2 shots to break the geometry, a third to hold it broken. No one asked her plan. No one asked anything. The room had decided waiting was safer than acting. She had been patient. She had been silent. She had written doctrine in notebooks no one cared to read. Now the valley posed the oldest question, and she already carried the answer. She drew one slow breath and, for the third time, spoke softer but steadier. I can end this. They ignored her. Dana didn't wait for approval. She left the command center with her rifle across her chest, helmet clipped low, jaw set like iron. No one followed, no one stopped her. The men who mocked her sat in silence, watching the feed, content to let rules draft an obituary for 480 Marines. She moved like a shadow through the compound, past Humvees caked in dust and crates that stank of sweat and fuel. Her boots struck earth in a rhythm steadier than her pulse. In her vest pocket, her father's dog tag tapped with each step. Its metal thinned by his years of service and hers, the letters faded but never gone. At the edge of the compound, Dana Morales checked her loadout. Suppressed M40A5 slung tight, spare magazines snug in their pouches, rangefinder clipped, notebook pages sealed in a plastic sleeve tucked close to her chest. She carried everything she needed. Not for recognition, not for protocol, but for geometry and survival. The climb toward the Overwatch ridge was punishing, loose shale sliding underfoot, the slope fighting every step. She kept low, moving with the patience of someone who had rehearsed this approach 1,000 times in her head. Dust clung to her face, rock scraped her sleeve, but she pressed on, breath steady, until she reached a crown bent just enough to mask her silhouette. She dropped prone, set the bipod, and let the world collapse into her scope. Below, chaos churned alive. Marines huddled behind burning vehicles, trapped beneath sheets of fire from every side. Muzzle flashes stitched across the ridges. RPG teams scrambled, searching for angles. Dust boiled up in violent clouds where rounds chewed the ground. The battalion was being devoured in slow motion. Dana pressed her cheek to the stock, her crosshairs settling on a machine gun nest perched 900 meters out on a rocky spur. The weapon spat fire in relentless rhythm, pinning an entire squad into the dirt. She exhaled. The reticle froze. She squeezed. The suppressed crack slipped into the valley like a whisper. A heartbeat later, the gunner folded, his weapon clattering silent. For a moment, the valley paused. Marines lifted their heads in bewilderment. Then the radios erupted. "Who's firing? Command, is that air cover?" Negative. No KS cleared. Dana chambered another round, her eyes already scanning. The next target exposed itself. An RPG team, one man clutching the launcher, the other feeding a rocket. Barely 70 meters from a pinned squad, the tube aimed toward a smoking Humvee. Dana measured the arc, read the drift of smoke, and fired. The gunner dropped before he could launch. The rocket tumbled harmlessly into dirt. Marines on the ground shouted across the net, "What the hell? Who the hell's covering us?" She offered no reply. Instead, she crawled forward 3 meters, shifting angle, keeping her outline fused against the rock. The enemy reacted fast. Sniper glints flashed from the opposite ridge, sweeping like searchlights. Dana pressed flat, heartbeat steady, fingers tracing dirt until its coolness grounded her. Inch by inch, she slid sideways until reaching cover behind scattered stone. She propped the rifle again, scope cutting toward the northern lip of the valley. She worked methodically. Each shot wasn't subtraction. It was severing threads. A command node collapsed mid-order, leaving his squad adrift. A machine gunner on the western slope jerked back from his tripod, his line of fire broken. A squad leader rallying fighters vanished in dust, his charge unraveling. Every squeeze wasn't just removal, it was creation. Gaps widened. Silences stretched. Each trigger pull bought Marines precious breaths. The killbox began to split apart. On the net, confusion shifted to recognition. This isn't air. This is a rifle. Who's got Overwatch? Eyes left. Something's cutting the spurs. Dana's breathing slowed. Her world narrowed to geometry, distance, wind, time. She swung her scope, calculated holdovers in a blink, and executed without pause. As she shifted, her sleeve snagged on rock, sliding back up her arm. For the first time in months, the tattoo on her forearm showed the Marine sniper emblem. Clear, unquestionable, earned, not ornament, not mistake, identity. Her scars, too, caught the light. Thin white lines across her knuckles, burns that had never fully healed. They told a past she never shared, missions etched into skin, erased from record for politics' sake. But now, those scars shouted louder than any dismissal. "Command, do you see this?" A lieutenant on the ground yelled. "We've got a ghost on overwatch." Then a grizzled voice, rough and unmistakable, cut into the net. Commander Blake Harlan, the SEAL commander moving with the battalion. "Call sign check," he barked. "Who the hell's covering us?" Dana Morales didn't answer, but someone else did. A comms tech on the operations net with access to her file whispered in shock. "Ghost 206, it's Ghost 206. The net froze. That heavy silence fell across the net, the kind where every ear strains to catch the next word. Commander Blake Harlan's tone shifted, suspicion softening into awe. "Wait. Ghost 206, that's Dana Morales." A stunned pause followed. Then a Marine's voice, breathless, broke through. "No way. Dead weight is Ghost 206. And suddenly, the battlefield itself seemed to hold its breath. Because Ghost 206 wasn't a nickname for ridicule. It was a call sign whispered at sniper school, tied to impossible shots and unconfirmed ranges. A legend forged long before politics shoved her aside. Back in the command post, Colonel Grant Mercer went rigid, his eyes fixed on the feed, on the flicker of her rifle cutting through dust. Realization spread across his face like a shadow. The support detail nobody wanted was the only thing holding the battalion together. Dana ignored it all. She just kept firing, scope leaping ridge to ridge, opening seams where walls had stood. The killbox unraveled into a corridor, the valley shifting from tomb to escape route. She never raised her voice, never demanded credit. She simply squeezed the trigger again and again, every shot dismantling the doubt that had stalked her for months. And in that moment, every Marine who had left, every sergeant who had dismissed her, every officer who had sidelined her, watched as Sergeant Dana Morales, Ghost 206, rewrote the battlefield one round at a time. What had seemed like a coffin hours earlier now thundered with rotor blades. Dust spiraled into choking clouds as the first helicopters dropped into the corridor she had carved with her rifle. Marines stumbled and sprinted toward the landing zones, some dragging wounded brothers, others covering with their final rounds. Each one of them understood the line between massacre and miracle was drawn by a single rifle hidden on the ridge. Dana stayed prone, cheek pressed to the stock, eyes fixed through the scope. Every helicopter arrival brought new threats. Muzzle flashes too close to the LZ, an enemy fighter racing for a desperate shot, a shadow moving where none should be. She cut them down with the same icy patience she'd shown on the range, half-second squeezes, controlled breaths. And then the radio crackled with something new. That heavy silence fell across the net, the kind where every ear strains to catch the next word. Commander Blake Harlan's tone shifted, suspicion softening into awe. "Wait. Ghost 206. That's Dana Morales." A stunned pause followed, then a Marine's voice, breathless, broke through. "No way. Dead weight is Ghost 206. And suddenly, the battlefield itself seemed to hold its breath. Because Ghost 206 wasn't a nickname for ridicule. It was a call sign whispered at sniper school, tied to impossible shots and unconfirmed ranges. A legend forged long before politics shoved her aside. Back in the command post, Colonel Grant Mercer went rigid, his eyes fixed on the feed, on the flicker of her rifle cutting through dust. Realization spread across his face like a shadow. The support detail nobody wanted was the only thing holding the battalion together. Dana ignored it all. She just kept firing, scope leaping ridge to ridge, opening seams where walls had stood. The killbox unraveled into a corridor, the valley shifting from tomb to escape route. She never raised her voice, never demanded credit. She simply squeezed the trigger again and again, every shot dismantling the doubt that had stalked her for months. And in that moment, every Marine who had laughed, every sergeant who had dismissed her, every officer who had sidelined her, watched as Sergeant Dana Morales, Ghost 206, rewrote the battlefield one round at a time. What had seemed like a coffin hours earlier now thundered with rotor blades. Dust spiraled into choking clouds as the first helicopters dropped into the corridor she had carved with her rifle. Marines stumbled and sprinted toward the landing zones, some dragging wounded brothers, others covering with their final rounds. Each one of them understood the line between massacre and miracle was drawn by a single rifle hidden on the ridge. Dana stayed prone, cheek pressed to the stock, eyes fixed through the scope. Every helicopter arrival brought new threats. Muzzle flashes too close to the LZ, an enemy fighter racing for a desperate shot, a shadow moving where none should be. She cut them down with the same icy patience she'd shown on the range, half-second squeezes, controlled breaths. And then, the radio crackled with something new.